Good morning, everybody. It looks like we're starting to have a few attendees join the webinar for this morning's Fishbowl Go Masterclass. We'll just wait a few more minutes for everyone else to join, and then we'll get started. Morning, Mike.
G'day, g'day. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Ah, cool.
Just waiting for a few more attendees to join in before we get started.
Perfect.
Good morning again, everybody. Just another minute or two before we get started. We had about 117 registrations for this morning's webinar. I think we're up about 53 have joined in so far. So I'll just give everyone one more minute to join in and we'll get started. Hey, Mike, just checking in the webinar, you can see my video okay? Yep, you can see your screen, so we're all good.
Yep, absolutely. Looking good.
All right, everybody. Well, it's a couple of minutes past 10. We said we're getting started at 10. We've just bumped the 60 attendees, so I think we might get started. Look, we've jumped to 62. Well, firstly, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today's Masterclass webinar on Fishbowl Go. Really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to go through this Masterclass with us. We hope you're getting value out of these Masterclass series that we are running. Quickly, hopefully most of the people as an attendees today know who I am or have met me at some point in time. My name is Simon. I am the Managing Director here at Fishbowl Inventory in Australia and New Zealand. I'm here to run you through Fishbowl Go today. So today's webinar is going to be, we'll try always to keep our masterclasses to about 45 minutes. The idea is then we can use the last 15 minutes to answer any questions that you may have. So what we're doing today, we also have Mike sitting in as Mike Bygrave, one of our solutions team, sitting in on the panel, and Mike's going to be sitting there in the background, and he's going to be monitoring the Zoom chat. So as we go through things, feel free to chat any questions to Mike. Mike will do his best to answer those chat questions as we go through things, so he'll look after that panel. But if there's any questions that are worth sort of talking about towards the end, we'll leave about 15 minutes to go back against any questions or and answer anything that's gone unanswered during the webinar. That's how we'll try and run things today. Just a quick outline of what we're going to go through. So we're really going to break this down into almost like a mini training session with Fishbowl Go. So we're going to go through what is Go, because not all attendees that are here today are currently using Fishbowl Go, where some attendees are. So a quick introduction of what Fishbowl Go is. We'll talk briefly about hardware and the different modules within the software itself. We're then going to go through a quick setup. So just a 5-minute, this is how you connect Fishbowl Go to your Fishbowl database. And the things to look out for and do. And then we're going to work through each module within Go fairly quickly. So we're going to go through the primary modules that most of our clients use Fishbowl Go for. We actually did a quick bit of research this morning. We actually found out since Go was introduced back in the mid-2016, we have about 200 companies now using Fishbowl Go across our client base. It's actually our most popular plugin for Fishbowl Go. So hopefully there's a lot of clients, they get some value out of what we cover off from a training point of view. All right, guys, well, let's dive into things. So firstly, what is Fishbowl Go? So let me just get off my PowerPoint here. As you all know, with Fishbowl, the whole logic behind getting inventory accurate within a business is managing the inventory workflow and telling the software what occurs as it occurs. If you get to that point within your business, then you really start to get live inventory reporting and a lot more value out of the software. Fishbowl Go is really an enabler to do that. So rather than working off paperwork and back entering data back into the office at the end of the day or end of a certain period, Fishbowl Go is really there driven to action the workflow steps within Fishbowl, i.e. receiving stock, picking stock, closing out a work order live on the floor as things occur rather than after the fact. That's really what it is. And there's a whole bunch of modules within the software that we'll go through today. Okay, firstly, what I wanted to talk about though is the hardware options. So Fishbowl Go is effectively an Android or iOS app. So there's two parts to the activation of Fishbowl Go for your Fishbowl software. You have to first purchase the plugin. So it is a purchased plugin. So you can talk to Mike or Kylie about that. Once you have that plugin, you then download the Fishbowl Go application either from the Android Play Store or from the Apple App Store. And that app then connects to Fishbowl via the plugin, either within your Wi-Fi or remotely if you've got drivers out on the road, for instance, via a SIM card back into your office or your database via the internet. So what sort of hardware do most clients run Fishbowl Go on? If you take a quick look at the video, by the way, guys, I'm going to shut off my video once we've shown you this. This is the type of hardware that most clients use. So this is probably a mid-range device. These devices range from your fairly, I guess, base models right through to your high-end freezer compatible Zebra devices, which is probably the top of the range. They typically have a palm strap on the back. Some of them have a trigger grip or a case you can get for them. And if you can see on the top here, this is the component where the barcode scanning bean comes out. So the vast majority of clients that use Fishbowl Go typically use them on one of these devices because they're built for that warehouse or manufacturing environment. In saying that, the software is just an Android or iOS app. So there is no reason why you can't use it on your iPhone or your Android device. The only thing you will find a little bit more painful using these devices is to scan the barcode, you have to activate the camera. And as we've all become aware with QR codes in the last 12 months, whenever you scan a barcode with a camera on a phone, it takes a second for the device to realize it's reading a barcode and decode that barcode into the data within it. So if you're doing scanning over and over, the phones are not a great solution because it's a little bit of a painful process, whereas one that has a beam coming out the top of it is a lot more efficient. But they're effectively the hardware options. We do actually have a document regarding the different hardware options that you have with running the software. And I think we're actually going to share that with all the attendees after the webinar today. Okay, next up, how I'm going to demo the software today is obviously you guys can't see what I'm doing on a device here on my desk. So I'm going to be using this screen here, which is a virtual Android emulator. So this is actually the Android version of Fishbowl Go, and this is the homepage when you log into the app. The iOS version is a little bit different looking, but all the functionality is effectively the same. But we'll be using the Android version today, which, by the way, if you do get a scanning device like a Zebra, or in this case, this one is a Eurovo, these all ship with an Android operating system these days. They once upon a time used to ship with a thing called Windows Mobile, but these days they're all Android. Okay, so these are effectively the modules that we have within the software. So we have the sales order fulfillment process of pick, pack, ship. Receiving goods in the door, so whether that be receiving a purchase order, receiving a return sales order, or even receiving transfers if you are multi-warehousing. The middle section of the modules here, move, add inventory, scrap, and cycle, they're all the terms you'll be familiar with from within the inventory screen within Fishbowl. So that's where we do our stock adjustments, moving from a bulk location to a pick face, moving from one area to another, maybe loading stock from the warehouse to a truck if you've got a rolling warehouse. And then our stock adjustments, add, scrap, and cycle, which all have the same functions as what we have on Fishbowl Go. Further down, we have a couple of lookup screens. So this is a part lookup screen where you can actually look up an item and say, tell me more about this item while I'm on the floor, and also where is that stock. And also we have a location specific lookup where you can actually walk up to a general location, maybe freezer 1 or row A, scan that, and it will show you all the stock within that location. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And then down the bottom, we have a couple of our newer modules. In the newer versions of Go now, you can complete your work order process on the floor. So we'll go through closing out a work order on the device. You can also these days, if you've got a rep on the road to a degree using Fishbowl Go, they can do sales orders and key in a sales order on their phone or iPad or Android tablet or scanning device. And lastly, one of the very popular modules we have down the bottom here is our delivery module. So this is effectively a proof of delivery signature capture or photo capture for businesses that deliver their stock to their customers. Although I've actually seen one scenario where what a customer did is actually wanted proof of delivery at their front counter because they had a lot of pickups. So what they were doing is they had a device on the front counter, just an Android tablet, with the delivery module open, and as a customer would pick up the goods, they would have them sign for it on a screen on the front counter. So they had PODs because they were selling to councils and whatnot. So we'll go through each of these. Now, there is a lot of modules there within Go. It's very, very unusual for a business using Fishbowl Go to use every single module. Quite often what we see is clients, when they first get the scanning in place, they'll start off by using Fishbowl Go for a very couple of specific reasons. They might be picking their sales orders via scanning, and they might obviously use it for stock taking, which is probably the biggest time saver with a scanner. But over time, clients may introduce and start to do other processes within the software. So not everybody uses every module, okay? But what we'll do today is try and get through each of these modules in the training session. Okay, so what do we do to install and set up Fishbowl Go? So as I mentioned before, on the devices where you're going to use Fishbowl Go, you need to jump on the App Store or the Android Play Store and download the Fishbowl Go app. So look back here, there's my app installed here on this virtual machine. Okay, by the way, I don't play games, but this Android emulator is more about playing games than running a scanning software. So that's why we've got some games on here. So you download the app. Obviously, you need either an Apple account or a Gmail account or something to sign into your Android Play Store to download that device. Okay. Once you have your app on your device, it will actually connect to Fishbowl in like a trial version. In the trial version, you can't do any of these functions on the home page except look up a part module. So even if you don't have the full version of Fishbowl Go, which is the paid plugin, you can use it simply to look up stock. Okay, so if you want, feel free to download it off the App Store and have a go with that. But to get all of the functionality, you do need the plugin. So once that's been purchased, up here within Fishbowl, you go down to your plugins page. So for everyone that's not aware, this plugins module shows you all the plugins that are available for Fishbowl. And down here a little bit further is the Fishbowl Go plugin. So that would have to be installed on your Fishbowl server. Actually, it shows there that I've actually got an update ready to install. I won't worry about doing that now because we're not going to do a restart. Once that plugin has been downloaded and installed, there is some basic configuration, both on Fishbowl or within Fishbowl and also on the device. Let's have a quick look at that. So once the plugin's installed, up here under integrations, you'll receive a new menu, which is the Fishbowl Go settings. If I jump in there, there's some fairly basic settings in here regarding the different modules. Probably the most used module is the one you see at the top of each section about scan each individual item. So, and that's used in each module within Fishbowl. You can see under inventory, it's here, under cycle counting, it's here, under picking and packing, it's all about scan each individual item. So what that function is driven to do is some businesses, they're picking smaller quantities. You know, they might be picking a box of toilet paper and some disinfectant if they're hospitality suppliers. And it's reasonable to say, let's scan each box. We're not picking 1,000 of something. But if you're a business where you're sending out, 1,000 screws, then you're not going to scan each one, or 1,000 packets, for instance. So if you don't have that turned on, you're able to scan the item once and confirm the total quantity you've picked off the shelf. If you have this function turned on, if you're picking 50 widgets, you have to go beep, beep, beep 50 times. So it's a fairly important setting. Some other settings here just really would be set up by us as part of your configuration. Because one thing with Fishbowl Go, I haven't mentioned yet, is there is obviously, like Fishbowl, the generic way to use the software. But we do have the ability to work with clients and change the workflow and drive it a certain way that's going to meet a business situation or a business case. So whenever you get Fishbowl Go, it's always advisable to spend a couple of hours with our consultants just to make sure it's been configured and set up the way that you guys want to use it within the business. But that's where the settings are within Go. Back over onto the application, there is also some basic settings from the main menu up here under settings. This is really just how many orders to display within a list, whether or not you show lot numbers for picking, the ability to show notes from an order. So if someone's putting a line item note on the order, to show those notes in the picking module, for instance. So there's some basic settings here. And there's also some new features down the bottom regarding voice announcements. So it's now possible, if you have these turned on, as you go to pick an order, Fishbowl, the device, actually has one of those, horrible speaking devices, which you can actually select the voice that you're using to actually read out the part numbers to you, or read out the location you're going to pick. So you actually have voice actions spoken to you rather than just reading off the screen if you wanted to do that. So there is some basic settings on the device as well, and that they are device specific. So different devices can be set up to work differently. Okay. The last thing we need to make all this piece come together, which is probably something we should have talked about first, is any device that you're using the app on. So whether it be a scanner within the warehouse, or whether it be a phone or a tablet or a driver out on the road, we need to ensure that that device can communicate with your Fishbowl database. Sounds silly, but it's something to be aware of. So those devices within your business need to be connected to your local Wi-Fi. And if you're using a device outside of the business where the Fishbowl server is, and the communication has to come back to your office, you need to set up what's called a port forward on your router. So you need to talk to your IT team or IT support about setting up that port forward that we can help you with. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we go through these processes is, okay, that's all great and well, but where do we get the barcodes from? So barcodes are effectively an identifier. Okay, so to think about, if we're picking stock, we need to know two things in Fishbowl. But as a minimum, we need to know where it's coming from, because as you know, with Fishbowl, locations are where your stock sits. We also need to know the item that we are picking, and there's also a quantity. And maybe some businesses have extra tracking, such as batch numbers or lot numbers or serial numbers. All the barcode really is a symbolization of that data. Okay, so we need barcodes on our products, on our shelves to identify our locations, and also barcodes representing batch numbers or serial numbers, etc. Now, some businesses work with product where the product comes in from your suppliers with a barcode on it already. If you have that, fantastic. What that means is, within your parts module, you would need to go through your parts list and ensure that those barcodes that are on those labels are put here in the UPC field within the part details. If you don't have barcodes on the product that come in, or you manufacture your own products, you set up Fishbowl to print labels out of the software. So within our reports, we have a whole bunch of labels here, and I could look at, for instance, a 2x4 barcode, and they can either be printed onto Avery sheets, or they can be printed onto rolls. Okay. And the other thing we quite often do when clients implement scanning is we'll customize these labels for what their requirements are. Okay, whether it has a business logo on it, or whether it has a description, whether it shows the price. So we really configure what these barcodes need to look like based on a client's specific needs. So that's a big part of making the scanning work. And from a location point of view, once you have your location set up in Fishbowl, which is up here under Setup Locations, so we have our shelves in here, we need to label those shelves with barcodes. So when you walk up to that shelf and scan it, we have something to scan. So once those locations are defined in the software, go back into your reports module, go to labels, and we have our location barcodes here as well, where we have barcodes representing all of the shelves. Okay, and obviously what you've got to do is physically go around and stick these on the shelves. Now, depending on your shelves and your layout, we may have to change the size or dimensions of these to fit onto your actual racks, but that's what we can work with to get the label set up for you. So I guess physically what we have now in the business is barcodes on our shelves, identifying our locations, and barcodes on our products, either labels that we've printed out ourselves or products that have come in with labels already on them, and we're utilizing that barcode. Okay. Mike, I noticed there's a couple of questions coming into the question section rather than the chat. You might want to take a look at that as well, if you can hear me.
I can hear you. I'll answer the easy ones, and we'll save a couple of those more in-depth questions for the Q&A session at the end. So yeah, if I don't answer them right now, we haven't missed them.
Okay, cool guys. Well, let's move on over now into using Fishbowl Go, I guess, in reality. So because I can't show you the device, what I'm going to be doing here is jumping from Fishbowl as we talk through these workflows and jumping over into the device to do the functions. So let's start off by doing a couple of things that don't require transactions. And that's our basic lookup screens down here. So let's firstly look at the part lookup. If I go into the part lookup, this is the function you actually can do on the free app that you download from the App Store without having the paid plugin. What you can do is come into the part module and you can either type a part number, search for it over here. Oh, sorry, you've got to type part of the part. So like B201 and press search. And you can see here it finds my B201 brake cable. It gives me the description. I can actually click on the little details with my finger and it expands that where I can actually see the UPC code. I can see its unit of measure and I can also see a product image. If the item doesn't have a product image, by the way, it'll actually have a little button there to activate the camera where you can then use the camera on your device to take a photo of the product and put that image into Fishbowl via the device if you wanted to. The other cool thing it does down the bottom here, it shows me all of my stock on hand for that item and which locations that stock is sitting in here. And I can see for my brake cables, I've got items sitting all over the place. One other handy little feature you'll notice next to the search up the top, we actually have a print icon here. Within your report settings, we can link a label there where you can actually print labels from the device. So that's a pretty cool little setting there as well. But that's effectively what our part lookup is. And you either use that by typing in a part number manually. The other way I sometimes see it working, let's say you've actually got a warehouse layout where you have a pick face and stock sitting in another location as a bulk area. Let's say the pick face is getting low. So you could walk up to that pick face, scan the remaining item, and you'll quickly be able to be told where the remaining, where the next amount of stock is. So you go and get it from that different location if you need to. By the way, I won't talk about this again, but earlier we talked about using the scanning device versus our phone. If you are using Fishbowl Go on a phone, what you need to do when you get to a data entry screen, i.e. select the part number, you need to activate the camera to scan a barcode. And what you'll find in Fishbowl, whenever you're in one of those fields, there's this little barcode symbol up the top here in the right-hand corner. When you click on that barcode symbol, it activates the camera on your phone to scan the barcode. And that's through each module. But that's our part lookup. Going back to our homepage, the next, I guess, lookup function we have is the location lookup. This is where you can go into location lookup. You can scan a particular location or search for a particular location. So I might go to, in my Sydney warehouse, I want to go to the location called stock 100. Okay, and press enter or record. Oh, there's nothing in there. That's great. Oh, sorry, that's the description. Let's actually go back up here. Stock 100. Now again, I've typed that in there because I'm on this virtual app on my laptop, but what you would do physically is scan that location label on the shelf that I talked about earlier. And when you go there, it'll actually show you what stock is in that location. Okay, so I go into it and it shows me all the current items sitting in that area. So this could be a freezer or a truck or what have you. And it shows me all of my current stock on hands there. Now for the items, if you are using batch control, you'll actually notice the basic items just show stock on hand. But when you have an item that has batch control or serial numbers or what have you, it'll actually show you, hey, you have 8 mountain bikes in that location and they have tracking. If you click on the tracking, it then goes in and lists the serial numbers. And in this case, I've got IMEI numbers against those bikes as well. But it shows you the tracking for each item. If I go to the Barley, it shows me what batch number is sitting in that location. Okay, so you can drill right down to the quantity per each batch within that location lookup. But that's our location lookup screen as well. Okay, back to our homepage. Now, the next thing we're going to go through, I guess, is stock taking. So we'll move back up here a little bit and we'll talk about these different stock functions. Firstly, so there's 4 in total. The first one we have here is move. So this is typically used if you're out on the floor and you want to quickly tell Fishbowl we've moved stock from this area to that area. How you do a move is you go into moving. You would walk up to the shelf that you're about to take the stock from and you would scan the location barcode. Again, I can't do that, so I'll type, Sydney dash stock. You would scan the item that's sitting on that shelf. You say, it tells you how many are currently in that location. You can see I currently have on hand in that area 42. Let's say I'm going to move 5 somewhere else. So I'd put 5 in here and I would come down to here and I'd walk over to the other shelf where I'm putting it and I would scan the barcode where I'm placing it. So Sydney dash stock 100. And I'll hit record down the bottom. Okay, and that transaction's been recorded. You get a success message down the bottom and that stock's been moved. Okay, so that's how a move works, pretty simple. In fact, it's probably one of the simplest transactions you can do through Fishbowl Go. The next three functions we have around move is adding inventory into the system, scrapping, and cycle counting. Now, they do the exact same things as you do in your inventory module. So cycle, add, and then over here on the right, scrap. Okay. So I guess the most used function is our cycle count. This is what's used for stock taking. So let me show you how quick this works. So if I just look in my inventory module here in Fishbowl, let's say I'm going to stock take, just to show you what the information is beforehand. In that Sydney stock 200 location, I have 348 of these breaks at the moment. Okay. Let's say I've got somebody out on the floor today doing some cycle counting. They might be working down a particular aisle or what have you. What that person can do once they have the device is say, I'm doing some cycle counting this morning. They would walk up to the first shelf, scan where they're standing, Sydney dash stock 200. Whoop. Stock, can't type, 200. They would scan the item sitting on that shelf, so B200. They would either scan them by going beep, 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 and Fishbowl will increase the quantity, or I can count them manually and say, no, there's actually 350 on that shelf. Just like a normal scrap or a cycle count through Fishbowl, you do have the ability to place a note or assign the cost to a customer, and also assign it to a class or a zero category if you're using those. And you hit record. And that's now done. In fact, you get success down the bottom again. And if I look back in Fishbowl, if I hit refresh now, I can see that my stock has been adjusted to 350 in that location. The other thing that most people do if they have a staff member out on the floor doing a stock take down a particular area for the day is once that cycle counting process has been done, you can obviously run off a cycle count report in your reports module under accounting to see what stock adjustments have been done for the day. And you can see if I look at the bottom, there's the one that I just did for my B200s for adjustment of 2 with a total value of 243 that's not yet posted across to my accounts. So you get a report at the end of the day of what they've cycle counted while they're out on the floor. But that's effectively doing a live stock take as you walk around the floor. One little tip I've seen there, if you are buying these devices and using Fishbowl Go, quite often what you'll see is quite often businesses will have, these scanners for their day-to-day use. So if they're picking each day, they'll have the right number of scanners for picking how many people are picking all day, every day. If the business shuts down, 30th of June, that joyous time where you're doing an annual full stock take, quite often what you can do is, because this uses the same user configuration as sitting at your desk. So if you've got a few more staff out on the floor for the day doing stock taking, they can log out of Fishbowl on their computers, download the app, log into Fishbowl Go on their phones, and all of a sudden you have 2 of these normally. Everyone can use their phones for the stock taking for the day and go down a row each or a section each to make it easier. So it's a handy little thing just to use it on the phones occasionally. So that's pretty much cycle counting. The add inventory is exactly the same, and so is the scrap. So I'm not going to bother going through both of those because they're the same steps and what you would do through the software. The location, scan the part, how many you're adding in, what the cost is, and record. Okay, pretty simple. But they're our stock functions. Let's now move up to the top section, which is using Fishbowl for moving stock in and out of the warehouse. So again, what we quite often see when customers are using scanning in their workflow, they don't typically do all 3 steps. I've seen a lot of clients recently in the last 12 months where they pick all of their orders on the scanner. They may do a double check by packing the items in a packing bench into the boxes or pallets via the pack step. But then they might be using our integration with Starship It. So they don't ship through the scanner, they ship through the Starship It plugin. So you're not always using all of these workflows. What I might do though today to actually show you the delivery module in the whole same process, let's put a sales order in the system. Let's go and pick it. Let's then pack it as a double check to make sure the staff member's got the right items. And then we'll assume that it's been packed onto a truck, and I'll pretend I'm then the delivery driver getting a POD out on the road. So over here in Fishbowl, if I go into my sales orders, I think I've prepared one earlier. I put an order in the system here this morning. I've got an order here, number 50466, for some brake cables with a couple of items on it. Now, once that sales order has been issued, depending on how you've configured those settings for Fishbowl Go, that order will be sitting on the scanner ready for picking. In fact, if I go over to my scanner and I'm a picker out on the floor, if I go down to the bottom of my orders, I've got a whole bunch in here. Go up to my last sales order, because you see work orders in here as well. And there's my sales order on today's date to pick. So you can actually sort these list of orders by the order number, which is obviously how they were created, by priority, if you are using priorities in the business, or the date of the order. Okay, so depending on how you want to sort. One other option that you do have with these list of orders on the scanners is if you're a business where you've got a lot of picking happening each day and you have like a head picker that wants to assign picks out to certain staff members to scanners, then within the picking screen, you could have somebody sitting on a computer in the office, and as these sales orders are sitting here and come into the pick list, they can open up the order, assign it to a person here under the details, and then start the pick. And what that does, it will push that pick to that person's scanner they're logged in as. And they might open up the next order and push it to a different person. So the people out on the floor on the scanners only see the picks that are assigned to them. So that might be relevant for some of you guys today. Let's now say that we're picking this order. So I go back over to my scanner. I say, I'm going to do this sales order here now. Again, what it does, just like the picking module, it shows you what items to pick and which location those stock items are in. So I would walk up to that shelf and I would scan the product. Now, the biggest thing with scanning, it improves accuracy, because if I don't scan a barcode representing that item, the device won't do anything. It'll make a silly noise. It'll go doo-doo, and you don't progress into the details of the pick. So you literally, I guess you can still put the wrong item on a trolley or in a box, but it stops a user being able to close out a pick until they scan the right items. So that's where the biggest thing that scanning delivers is accuracy. So as you can see here, I'm picking 5 of these from this location to my shipping bay, and I can pick that item. I pick the next item now, and as I pick these items, it drops off my scanning list, so the list gets shorter and shorter as I pick them. One little side note here, if there is a message against that, you can see the message here in the screen if you're showing show messages or notes. And if the product has an image, they can also double check they got the right product by clicking this little landscape button down the bottom here, where it shows you what that product looks like if the product, if they want to double check. Let's pick that item. Now, the moment I pick that item, if I go back to Fishbowl now, I was already in that screen, so just hit refresh. And you'll notice now it updates to blue ticks. That order has now been picked, and it will drop off the list on the left-hand side because it's now picked. Now, let's say that that person now moves it to a conveyor or to a packing bench. If there's a separate person on the packing bench packing those items into a box at that point in time, they can do the pack step. If you're picking straight into boxes, you can also turn on a function called auto pack with Fishbowl, which means you don't have to do the packing step. But let's just pack that order today as well. So we'll go into the picking, and let's say we've packed it into cartons or onto a truck. I'm going to pack that, and I'm going to pack that. And at the time you close out the pack on this device, it can also print the default packing list. So if you've got a printer out in the warehouse, the moment they scan the items into a box, if there's a printer nearby, it can print out the packing list, and they can throw the packing list in the box with the goods. I'm going to say no. Now, if I was to use a third-party carrier, I could either say that this is being shipped via the scanner, I can still ship it over in Fishbowl, or if I was using Starship It, I could generate my consignment through Starship It and close out the order. But what we're going to do today to show you how this delivery module works is let's assume that I've packed that customer's order onto a truck, one of my own trucks, that I'm going to have a driver out do a delivery. What the driver can do is once those orders are packed, so I've got that packed order sitting here, which one is it? This one here. I could print out a run sheet, okay? But today, that's actually going out. I've said it's going out via Star Track, so let's just say Star Track. I can get a run sheet that prints out. And what the driver can then do, let's say the driver is out doing their deliveries. Then on his phone, as he does a delivery, he would go into the delivery module. And if that order has a packing list with it, which it typically would with a driver, they could scan the barcode on the top of that packing list to bring up the order. I can't do that again, so I'm just going to click on it with my finger. It is that one there. They go into the order, and they can either confirm that they've delivered those goods by taking a photo on their phone. So let's say the customer they're dropping off at is not open and they've dropped it to a back door or a waiting area. They can take a photo of where the goods were dropped and do POD there. But if they're actually handing the goods to somebody, they can actually confirm with signature. So let's go down the signature path because my camera is not going to work on my laptop. So let's just confirm with a signature. It turns the driver's phone sideways, so there's plenty of room to sign. It'll put the person's name from the order in the top list here, but if someone else signs for the goods, the driver can just put in here, this was signed for by Jimmy Jones. And Jimmy puts his best signature on the driver's phone, which looks nothing like Jimmy's signature. and the driver hits save. Now, the moment the driver does that, it throws them back to their delivery list so they can head off and do the next delivery. But back over here in Fishbowl, if I look at that order now, it's automatically converted its status from packed to shipped. And under the details, it brings in who signed for the order, and there's a POD signature here. In fact, if you needed to send off a POD to a head office or what have you, if you then reprint the packing list, it shows the signature on the packing list as well. Okay, so that's effectively using on the scanner, the picking and the packing step. And then instead of using shipping in that case, we used a delivery with a driver. But that's pretty much getting an order out the door via scanning. But like I said, there are different workflows you can use there, especially regarding picking. Does the person just pick the next order on the screen? Do they get assigned specific picks? Do you want to send multiple picks to a person at a time via a group pick? So there is multiple ways to do that. So it's probably the most configurable module, the picking area. So I advise, if you are using that, just to talk to one of our consultants to make sure they're using it the way that your business operates. Okay, 2 more modules to cover off before we get into questions and answers. Let's get some stock in the door via receiving. And then lastly, we'll close out with doing a work order. So let's go and put a purchase order in the system. Actually, I think I may already have one. No, I don't. Let's quickly put a purchase order in. So my favorite supplier, let's buy some more brake cables because we just sold some of them. And 10B202s. Okay, so here's my purchase order sitting in the system, purchase order number 10304. So if I go to receiving, I'll leave that sitting in the background so you can see what happens automatically as I receive these goods on my tablet or scanner. So let's now fast forward. That stock for that purchase order turns up at our warehouse or our door, and we want to check that into inventory. So over here on the scanner or our device, we go into the receiving module. It shows me the purchase orders still waiting to receive, as well as any return sales orders or transfers if you're multi-location. And you can either find these orders by order number or sort them by vendor and find it by vendor. Okay, it was purchase order 10304 we were doing right now. So let's go into that order. And as we go into that receiving screen, just like the receiving screen in Fishbowl, it shows us what stock I should be receiving and where I should be packing it away to if the stock has a default location. Now, as I'm unpacking the goods, I can scan the barcode on that item, or if it doesn't have a barcode, I can click on it with my finger, confirm the location where I'm putting it. Now, it shows me here by default where I normally put it, which is the default location on the part. But if I decide to put this stock somewhere else in my warehouse, the person on the device would simply click up here, walk up to the different shelf and scan that location barcode. And they click on the truck and that records it. Now, partial deliveries work exactly the same. If I receive a partial of my B202s, I scan them and I can either go beep, beep, beep if I'm that for scanning each setting I talked about earlier, or I can simply override and says, no, only 8 have turned up into that location, click on the red truck. And because I haven't received everything, I can just save at that point in time. I can also print a report from here, and that can be a receiving label, which I'll show you in a moment. Let's just save that. And if I look back in my background now, I can instantly see there's my 20 brake cables received and the other 8, which is a split delivery. Now, let's say on delivery, I wanted to print that report, which you could have printed from the scanner. I showed you that little print button a moment ago, but you can also print from here after the fact, like a receiving label. So something like this for purchase order 10304, where it prints off labels for what you received, and you'll notice it's printing out 28 labels. So it's going to be printing 20 labels for my B201s and 8 labels for my B202s, because that's what I've received so far. So if you do need to label goods on receiving because they don't already have a barcode on them, but you want to barcode them through the rest of your business process, there's an example of a label we print out as we receive stock in. Okay, the last module we're going to sort of step through before we go into our questions and answers is our work order module. Now, I understand that not everyone in the webinar manufactures, but we'll just jump through this quickly for the manufacturers that we do have. So let's quickly go back to my Fishbowl homepage, go into manufacturing, and I've got a nice simple work order here for manufacturing of a lighting system. It has 2 stages in it, but I'm just going to keep it super simple today and step through doing the first stage, which is this toggle switch bracket I'm going to assemble. So let's say I'm a person that's doing an assembly or recording a manufacturing process out on the floor. I'm over here on my device out on the factory floor, and I go into the work order module. Again, it lists all of my open work orders. Okay, so again, if you have a work order piece of paper out on the floor, it'll typically have a barcode in the top right-hand corner. So the user can just scan that barcode to bring up the correct document. I have to scroll down this morning and open up work order 246002. So we go into the work order. And if there are any instructions against that BOM, it'll have your instruction steps here, which a user can tick off. But the other thing it has to do, it notices the items are not picked yet. So it forces me to go and pick the stock. Now that's really important if you're using batches or serial numbers in your assemblies as well. But effectively what it's done, as I says, I need to pick the materials for this work order. It's thrown me over to the picking screen for that work order. And it shows me, just like picking a sales order, what to pick for this assembly and where to go and get it from. So I walk over to this bay, I pick my base into my assembly area. By the way, that to location is going to be the location that you've assigned to that work order. So if you're breaking up your work orders by assembly areas like bay 1 or bay 2 or my mixing room, then that's where it's going to pick to. So we pick our base, we pick the body, and that picks all of the items, and it loops me straight back around now to close out the work order. So I'm doing this all at once, but typically in a business, if you want to record things as they occur, you could do the pick of the parts right now. You say, I'm picking them now. And later on today, as you finish that assembly, say, I've now completed that work order as well. So there can be a timing difference between these steps. Let's just go proceed through the work order. You can confirm what you used, because as you know, if you're manufacturing in Fishbowl Go, you can pick 10, but then say I only consumed 8 of something, and it will leave that leftover in that assembly area if you overpick and underconsume. So this is the ability to actually consume a different quantity. Because I only have 1 of each, I can't do that. It shows me what labor I've used, and I can actually change my labor time here if I want to cost more or less time in here. And lastly, just like finishing a work order, it says, where have I put that finished assembly? So I'm going to put that finished good back into a warehouse location called Sydney stock. Now, I guess physically on the floor, if you were putting this finished assembly away or into a certain bay or a crate, you would scan the barcode that's in that area representing that's where you're putting it. So this is where I'm putting it, and you hit complete. And it can also print a report at that point if you want of what you've done. But you'll notice back in the manufacturing order screen, we have finished that work order now, and then we repeat that process for the next stage of assembly. So I'm actually about 2 minutes off my planned time, which is perfect. So it's about 11:15 Queensland time, 12:45 noon in New South Wales and Vic and some of the other states. But what I might do now is flick over to questions. Wow, I've just glanced at the chat screen. Mike, you have been busy. So Mike, have you sent through any questions to hold over to the end yet?
Yeah, I have through to the private chat. Okay. Yeah, so there's a couple there.
Let's have a quick look here. What I'll do, guys, I'll just read out the question. Hopefully it applies to lots of people, and then I'll try and answer them. So Eustace Archibald asked, can we scan a master carton when receiving containers of stock? We do it. Where do we put master carton barcode in Fishbowl part number? So when receiving, you have to receive or scan per the unit of measure that you've purchased at the moment. So what I mean by that is if you've got a purchase order here, these cases are by the each, but if you want to receive by the carton, you have to purchase by the carton. So you'd have to order in, for instance, do I have anything by the carton? Here I've got barley, I can buy it by the kilo, or I can buy it by the 20 kilo bag. If I'm physically receiving in 20 kilo bags, that's how I have to order it. Once you're ordering it by the 20 kilo bag, or in your case, the outer carton, that's how you can receive against. Okay. Now, obviously, once you've received an outer carton, you can then sell it by the outer carton or the inner from a selling point of view in Fishbowl. Okay. Now on that, by the way, if you are then buying by the outer barcode, that item is set up with a unit of measure as an outer barcode or an outer carton. So the barcode against that item in my part screen. If I go to the barley, would have to be the barcode representing the outer carton, how I'm buying it by. At the moment, you can't stock it by the each, but buy by the outer carton and put a barcode for the outer carton, unfortunately. It's something I've actually asked the US for a couple of times. Hopefully that'll be an enhancement in the future, but at the moment, you can only receive by the purchasing unit of measure, which is the base unit of measure for that part. Okay, next question from Tom Standing. When adding an item to stock, why does it not auto add the unit price unlike the desktop app in Fishbowl? Good question. I wish it did. That's probably more an enhancement request. You're 100% right. When you're in the add function, let me just compare this. So when you're in the inventory module here in Fishbowl and I open up a B201, I currently have an average cost for these brake cables of $1.81. If I was to add more inventory at the moment via add here into a location, it auto-populates the unit cost based on the current average cost of that item. Unfortunately though, yes, you're right. On the scanner, when you're adding inventory into Sydney stock for B201s, the unit cost doesn't pre-populate. You have to bring that up. Look, I can feed that back to the US. I don't know if there's a coding reason why they've never done that, or it got to do with some customers running average prices versus standard costs. I can pass that feedback on to the US, but at the moment you do have to enter a unit cost. Jonathan Curtis, how can I display the customer name in addition to the sales order number in the pick and pack? We have a large customer range with similar names, example, IGA, different branches. We need this information visible to avoid misspelling cartons. Yeah, so when it comes to the user interface within Fishbowl Go, we can't modify, for instance, if I'm in the picking screen, like you just mentioned, and if I go into a pick, we can't modify the name you see here below. So we do show the name off the order in all these modules. So I can see this is Allen's Raceway, for instance, or down here it's Allen's Raceway or BikerNet. I can't change what text is there. It is just the name off the order. If you do need to show additional information for picking, what I do recommend, we use the scanning for accuracy, but what you can do is still obviously print pick tickets off the sales order screen. So from here, print a pick report and display on the pick report any custom information that's required, such as addresses, carriers, and things that we don't see on the scanning device. Unfortunately, with the scanning user interface, there is always limited real estate on these size screens. So I guess from a development point of view, they have to pick and choose what's practical to show, and it's not every field within the software. Okay, Mike, have you got any more to send through to chat, or should I look at the Q&A panel?
Q&A panel. There's a question from another Mike there about cycle counting by bin. So I think we kind of covered that by cycle counting by location, but maybe if you can just run over that quickly.
No, so yeah, I know Mike's asked this previously. So Mike, we've talked about this. The biggest issue we have with cycle counting by bin location is just from a caching point of view. We have a location lookup now where you can go into the item. So what we've actually requested off the US is from this location lookup, go into a particular bin and actually have the ability over here on the right to action a cycle count for each of the items as you're working through that bin. But at the moment, you can't do a cycle count per bin. It's still by individual part number. That may have something to do with serialized inventory or batch controlled inventory, but they haven't added that at this point in time. But what I'm hoping for is a shortcut where you can go into a particular bin in the location lookup and then cycle count from here with a little function over on the right, but currently not available. Okay, guys, just looking in the QA there, I've got a new question popped in from Kirsten. For work orders, is there any way to make the number that you want rather? Is there any way to make the number what you want rather than auto-populate? Sorry, Kirsten, I don't know if you want to ask that question again. Don't really know what that one means. If you want to clarify that next couple of minutes, I'm happy to try and answer it. And guys, if you do have any other questions, we've got about 5 to 10 minutes still available in our webinar. And I'm happy to sit here and answer as many questions as you like. Again, if you don't have any other questions, we can wrap up shortly. Before anyone drops out though, just a couple of quick things. After this webinar, we are going to send out to all the attendees a document regarding hardware. So if you do have hardware questions, there's going to be a document and for that. And also there's an ebook that we have written regarding the use of barcode scanning within a business and different types of barcodes and things like that. So we're going to send out that document, which hopefully has a bunch of information that will be helpful to you. And lastly, we are recording this webinar. So once the recording is compiled with Zoom, we will share this link so you can go back and watch this webinar again and again. Okay.
Got a few coming through. I'm struggling to keep up, to be honest. So.
That's all right. We've got some more Q&A questions coming through as well. Okay, sorry, with Kirsten again, work orders make their own number. If so, sales order 100.01, can you change it? Look, the work order number cursor that you see within the scanner is the work order that you see within the system. So you can change the manufacturing order number up the top here, and then it will prefix it for a work order still with :001. I don't advise changing that number though. I have seen a couple of customers override that with the job name or things like that. The risk that you have is that number has to be unique within the system for reporting. Okay. And if, for instance, you create a job called, Project Smith, and then in 12 months' time, you forget about that and create another manufacturing order called Project Smith, you're going to have issues with reporting. So I don't advise overriding the numbers, and stick with a sequential numbering system like an invoice. The other thing why using names and things in the number is not great is because when we generate reports, such as a work order traveler, basic one here, we have a barcode representing that number. If you're using alpha characters such as letters and people's names, then the barcode can get quite fine, and some scanners will have trouble reading those barcodes because the barcode representation for alpha characters is much more detailed than they are for numeric characters. So don't advise changing the numbers. Okay, Amy, is there any option for adding extra parts to a manufacturing order once it is underway? Yes, there is, but not via the scanner, Amy. So the scanner is about actioning that we did something, not about driving a transaction. So what you would have to do, back on the screen here, before that work order is picked is, or as it's being picked, in the work order details, if you go across to the work order details tab, you can select the work order and you can add additional parts over here with the green plus. Once those parts have been added to the work order saying we need to use these extra parts, they will then appear on the scanner for somebody on the floor to be able to pick them. Okay, but you can't add items through the scanner. It's done from the office, and then the scanner is all about saying, I did this, not I'm making something up. Okay, question from Tom. When printing barcodes to a printer, how do I make sure the barcode is to size? That's something we have to help you with, Tom. So with barcodes and barcode labels and label printers, there is almost an infinite number of Avery size sheets or roll printers and labels. And there's different types of paper you can print onto as well. There's thermal transfer, there's direct printing. So, and then again, if you're working with freezer products where you're going to get ice and cold, you have to use different labels to if you're working with something else, or steel has a different whole, oiled steel has a whole other scenario around it. Really, that's where you need to work with our consultants to work out what your product is, how big your product is, because you might be working with a box that's massive, or you might be working with tiny little medical spare parts things where we need quite small labels. So what you really need to do is work with us to get the label the right size to the right type of printer, so that whether it's landscape or portrait, how it prints out, and design that label specific to your business. So because there is infinite options, Fishbowl doesn't come with infinite labels within it. Within the reports module, there are a bunch of different labels and a few different label sizes, but again, we can only cover the most common ones. You really should work with a consultant to design the labels how you need them. Okay, working down the list. Tracy, can you scrap multiple items in one location at one time? No, Tracy, again, for the same reason, or some businesses that use Fishbowl have serial numbers or batch numbers. So as part of scrapping an item, we have to validate, do we have to write off a serial number, or do we have to write off that quantity from a certain batch number? So you can't just take a whole bunch of items and scrap them at once. If you want to do something like that, that's definitely doing cycle count via Fishbowl desktop with an import of a CSV file. When you're scrapping on a scanner, you're actually beeping the item. So you actually scrap by going into the scrap, scanning the location, scanning the item, scrapping a couple, and then doing your next scrap function. Actually, one really cool tip that I've totally forgotten to mention as I've gone through the different functions in scanning today, I've just noticed.
The padlocks?
The padlocks, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Is if you've got generic locations like fridge 1 or area A, what you can do if you're doing all the cycle counting in that one location is once you scan that location the first time, so you scan the location on the shelf once, you can then click on this little padlock and it locks that. So what that now means is as I'm actually scanning the items in that location, I don't have to keep scanning the shelf. I now just have to scan the item and the quantity. And then so I'd go B201, 200, scrap. Whoop, let's scrap just 2 maybe. Scrap. And it leaves the location now to scan the next item, B202, 1, scrap. So you don't have to keep scanning the location. So there is that little thing there to actually lock certain settings so you don't have to keep re-entering them. Then when you do move to the next location, you unlock it and then scan the new location. Okay, Vicky, when receiving stock via the scanner, can you assign lot numbers and expiry dates to incoming goods? Most definitely. It has the same business controls that receiving on the computer does. So if you're purchasing an item that has a batch number, like let's quickly do a new purchase order for some barley. I'll buy in 2 bags of barley because I think my barley is stock controlled. So I issue that. So that's purchase order 10305. Let's jump back over to our scanner, receiving, purchase order 10305. As I receive those 2 bags of barley, it requires to enter a batch number. If I try to receive it without a batch number, I get an error. So I'll just put in there something, scan 100. So it has that same controls as you have within Fishbowl. So if the item is set up to track serial numbers or batch numbers or expiry dates, just like receiving on the computer, you have to enter that information to do it. You have to do the same thing on the scanners. Okay, Renee. Hey, Renee. Is there... Not really sure what that word is, but I think I've got the gist of things. If there is a note on the sales order, can you see that on the scanner? Most definitely, but you have to turn that setting on. So I went through the settings kind of quickly at the start of this webinar, but back up here under integrations, if you go to your Fishbowl Go settings, there is the ability here. Sorry, it's not on the computer settings, it's actually on the device settings. Back over on the device, for instance, in picking, if I go to my settings, there is the ability within the picking area to show notes, or within the different modules to show notes just here under other settings. Okay, and I've got that ticked on. What that means is if there isn't a line note against it, let's quickly go and do another sales order. I'm jumping around quickly now, guys, but I want to answer as many questions as I can within the time we have. If I just go and pick a B201 and I put a message in here, and issue that. They're on hold, but who cares? Whoop, I don't want to send an email. Let's cancel that. That was sales order 50467. So if I go into picking now, picking 50467. Okay, you can see a messaging here shows below the item. Okay. You can also see the line note. So if the other thing, by the way, Renee, in that example, I used a line note. If there is a general order note put over here in this note section, you can see that within the pick by clicking this little message down the bottom here. Whoop, I'm already in it, so I'll have to go out and come back in to see that. But if I go back into that pick, what was it? 467. Go into that pick again. If I click down here, a message here shows there as well. So that's where your messages show up. Where have we gone? Okay, guys, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I think I've lost track of what Q&A question I was up to, or it disappeared somewhere. Can we use chassis numbers, Kirsten? Yes, so chassis numbers is a serial number, so you would have to create a custom tracking. So it's not really a scanning question, but in your parts module, up under tools, module options, you can create your own types of tracking. So you would create a chassis number or a VIN number as a text type. And then within your part, say, hey, on this particular thing, I track a VIN number or a chassis number. So the answer is yes. Okay. Okay, yeah, good question from Brian. So I have multiple suppliers for one item. I need to store the supplier UPC under my part number UPC. Can I store all these to return the part number as a result? Kind of, Brian. So the only way to kind of work around that at the moment is to put the vendor, if you've got multiple vendors for a single part, like if I go to my brake cables, I've got a whole bunch of vendors set up for my B201s. You have to put the vendor's UPC as the vendor part number because you can receive via that. But unfortunately, there is only one UPC against the part itself. So you have to use the vendor's part number at the moment. What would be great in the future, and again, I have said this to the US development team, we just don't have it in the current build, is the ability to have a vendor-specific UPC here next to the vendor's part number, but we don't currently have that. Jared, quick location on setting up a new location. Jared, with those kind of really basic questions, you can always jump on the Fishbowl Inventory Wiki, so fishbowlinventory.com/wiki, and search for locations. It will show you how to do that. But just really quickly, up here under Setup, you would go to Location, and then click New, and you can fill out a new location details and the warehouse that it's in and the type of location. Once that location is set up with a name and a description within a warehouse, you can then jump over to your reports and print off a location barcode for that. Okay. Okay, guys, I'm going to answer one more question, then we're going to have to wrap up. But if we do miss you today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or give us a call, and we'll try to answer any questions that you do have. What have we got here? What is the easiest way to receive in a 40-foot container of stock, as well as sell products individually, but raise POs in boxes of 100? How far away is it? Oh, sorry, users, that sounds like it's a similar question to the outer boxes. I don't know how far away they are about having a different buying UOM from a part UOM, but we can follow that up with them again. Regarding receiving a 40-foot container, there's no easy way. There's a lot of product typically in a 40-foot container. What I will mention though, a couple of our container clients do use is the put away function. So users, maybe what I'll get you to do is reach out to us in the next day or two, and we can explain what the put away is. Because typically when you're unloading a container, you've got a pretty short time frame to unpack. So what a lot of clients can do is quickly do a receive, not via scanning, just do a bulk receive in the receiving module and receive everything into the receiving bay. So you receive rather than to a shelf, you receive everything to a receiving bay. And then what they do is within the transfer order module, we have a function here called a put away, which moves everything from the receiving bay, i.e. where you quickly unpack the container to, and it splits up a pick to move everything to their individual shelves. You then can use the scanner to pick everything out of receiving to their correct shelves via what's called a put away function. So that might be something that's helpful with your container unpacks. All right, guys, we are out of time, so I am going to wrap up the webinar at this point in time. Hopefully I covered as many questions as we could. I know Mike's been very busy chatting with questions answered via the chat. I will get everything out to you after the webinar. We very much appreciate everyone attending today. It's been an outstanding webinar with our participants, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. Until the next webinar or masterclass, I look forward to talking to you all again. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.